I would love to see a freelancing platform built on sBTC. Imagine the ability where anyone around the world can work on projects and be able to earn Bitcoin for it. And companies can post micro tasks and essentially put Bitcoin as collateral.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bitcoin Builders Breakdown. We are here talking about everything when it comes to building in the Bitcoin ecosystem and around Bitcoin layers to make sure that you have the most information and educated on what to do if you're looking to build in this space. Today, I'm joined by one of the great community members within not only the Stacks, but also Bitcoin ecosystems. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. With that being said, Andre, welcome to the show. A quick introduction.
All right, Kyle, thanks for having me here. You're too kind with your introduction. But hi, everyone. My name is Andre. I am the sBTC resident at the Stacks Foundation, where I focus on sBTC product development and partnership. So this includes everything from working with our infrastructure partners to looking at new commercial opportunities for sBTC, all the way to working with many of the startup founders that are building new applications on the sBTC protocol. It's been a really busy year this year, as you can imagine. So excited to be here today to catch you all up on some of the latest and greatest happening in the ecosystem.
Awesome. Andre, you couldn't be a better person to break this all down for us as well. I mean, you sit on all sides of the table, as you mentioned, and I want to come back to the key focus of today, and that is sBTC. You have been leading this initiative. You've been working on this in so many different ways, as you mentioned, throughout ecosystems. But what is it? What is sBTC?
So sBTC is programmable, permissionless, non-custodial Bitcoin. You can think of it as just an easy way to move Bitcoin onto the Stacks layer 2. And basically the vision for this is that we really want to be the best scaling solution for Bitcoin that can also unlock some additional functionality for your Bitcoin that just isn't possible on L1. So what sBTC really aims to fix is providing a low-cost solution to use your sBTC with faster transaction times that you can also use to build in decentralized applications.
Got it. And how does that work in its technicals? Because it all sounds great, right? Being able to move something from one place to another. You mentioned speed and scalability being what an L2, a layer 2 does very well, but how does it actually work with sBTC's design?
Yeah, so sBTC is a part of a major upgrade happening to the Stacks network over the next few months. It's all part of a upgrade called Nakamoto, which will have some significant speed and scalability improvements to the Stacks layer, but focusing on sBTC specifically. So as I mentioned, it's a way to transact with Bitcoin on the Stacks layer. So at its core, it's a way to move Bitcoin from the L1 into the L2. So the way this would work is that a user would send a Bitcoin transaction to the sBTC threshold wallet. At that point, Stacks nodes would then detect that that transaction has occurred and that the Bitcoin has been confirmed to the threshold wallet. At that point, a threshold majority of signers on the Stacks network must agree that that transaction is valid. So right now, the protocol dictates that 70% of those signers must agree on that transaction. And assuming that's confirmed, sBTC is minted at a one-to-one basis to be used on the Stacks layer. At that point, it can fully benefit from full smart contract programmability, and users can redeem their Bitcoin at any time. So they're always able to have access to that Bitcoin that's held in the reserve wallet.
Wow. So you're able to take something from the L1 being Bitcoin, that asset, and bring it up to a layer 2. In this case, we're talking about Stacks. And from there, it's programmable. So you could do anything. You can bring it into an application, maybe into various use cases. Is that correct?
That's right, Kyle.
All right. Well, with that, I mean, what are some of those use cases? I mean, now that I've got it right, what are some of those use cases that you can take it and do with it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think, when I think about this, there's really two categories of use cases that I consider to be like a top priority for the ecosystem as we're developing sBTC. So the first is really to develop a robust DeFi ecosystem on Bitcoin. So this includes the ability to borrow, lend, and trade Bitcoin on chain without going through any centralized counterparty, really unlocking Bitcoin's usage as a collateral type. And so this can include all sorts of trading options, whether it's options trading, derivatives trading, perpetuals and futures trading, the ability to go long short on your Bitcoin. Is all sorts of these sorts of foundational products that can be created, as well as the ability to create borrowing and lending markets around Bitcoin. When I speak to users, this is one of the most requested features that users have when for what they want to do with their Bitcoin. So, people want to be able to, to lock up their Bitcoin and access stablecoins, so that they can access stablecoins without incurring a taxable event and going through any sort of centralized counterparty. So we can build these sorts of on-chain borrowing and lending markets directly on sBTC, so the user doesn't have to go through any of these sort of centralized counterparties. The second category that I want to talk about, Kyle, is really around peer-to-peer transfers. So I already mentioned that sBTC can offer faster and cheaper payments than the Bitcoin L1. And so as such, I think it's an exciting opportunity where users such as exchanges and businesses may opt to actually peg in their Bitcoin to the L2 to provide a better experience and maybe save some money on gas fees. So creating the sorts of partnerships and infrastructure for peer-to-peer payments to really take off is something that we're looking at. But there's a ton of different options here for different use cases. Ultimately, the vision and the big idea here is to build a full economy around Bitcoin with sBTC at the center. And these are just a couple of the pieces that can make that happen.
That's huge. And Andre, if I'm correct, you also published a post around 21 different startup ideas that could be built around sBTC. Is there maybe one or two that you're excited about seeing and its potential to drive forward that vision?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for plugging the post. So yeah, there's several different categories, even outside of the ones that I mentioned. But one that I think is really interesting is the ability to earn Bitcoin. I think is an interesting way to onboard people into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And so, I would love to see maybe a freelancing platform built on sBTC. Imagine the ability where anyone around the world can work on projects and be able to earn Bitcoin for it. And companies can post micro tasks and essentially put Bitcoin as collateral. So even just the ability to start earning Bitcoin, I think, and creating a global marketplace for that would be really interesting.
It's huge. And Andre, we've talked a little bit about this together. And I think it's an important topic for those to know is as the Bitcoin economy is starting to grow and thrive, very similar to moments we've seen in 2017 with the Ethereum ecosystem. That said, with new infrastructure like sBTC, how is it maybe different from those that also may exist in the ecosystem as well? Its competitors, if you will.
Yeah, it's a good question. sBTC implements fundamentally a different design than the competitors that we've researched in the marketplace. So when you look at many of the competitors that exist today, they are operating on federated closed membership networks where the Bitcoin is held by a multi-sig set of signers that are typically in the single digit range of people that are on the multi-sig. And so that is true for WBTC on Ethereum, or RBTC on RSK, Liquid, and many of the other alternatives that are out there. sBTC is really the only solution that offers an open and permissionless network where anyone is able to become a validator on the network, and that also settles down to Bitcoin. So there is TBTC on Ethereum, which has an open membership signer set, but they are focused on bridging to Ethereum. So I think that vision of developing a Bitcoin native economy, building on Bitcoin, is really what differentiates sBTC from many of its competitors, and doing so in an open and permissionless way.
And that said, what is the roadmap to the launch of sBTC? It sounds like it's still in development, progressive development, but what is the roadmap and what can people expect over the coming months leading up to that major release you mentioned, the Nakamoto upgrade around stacks?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have our first milestone coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's a developer release that will allow more community developers to start interacting with sBTC on Testnet. So this will allow us to start really testing the deposits and withdrawal flows. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. And then when we start to look out over the next 6 to 8 months, what we've done is really scoped out the roadmap leading up to the full Nakamoto and sBTC release, really kind of scoping these down into individual milestones that are focused on Nakamoto. So really, after this developer release for sBTC, a lot of the attention will be primarily on delivering the Nakamoto testnet, which will introduce some new consensus rules to how the Stacks network operates. And then we will issue we'll develop an implementation of sBTC on top of these new Nakamoto consensus rules, and that's all kind of gearing up to the mainnet launch that you alluded to.
Wonderful. And that developer testnet that you mentioned, the developer release testnet, break it down for us. What can people expect to get their hands on? You mentioned the withdrawal feature as well. If you can, give us a quick overview on what people can expect.
Sure. So for this release, we really developed a suite of developer tools. So we'll be releasing a bridge API and SDK that will allow developers to start bringing in a lot of the bridge functionality directly into their apps, and providing the tools that will allow them to either have complete control over that implementation, or if they prefer an SDK, something a little bit more out of the box, they have that solution for it too. We've also developed a web UI so users can go to this interface to interact with the bridge directly. And so, for this developer release, we're really looking for developers to come in and start testing these contracts, really trying to stress test the system, try to break things. We're looking for feedback. If there's anything that's missing, any sort of feature requests, this is really the opportunity to play a role in the development of sBTC, sort of giving that feedback back to the working group and many of the core engineers that are working on it. Really, no piece of feedback is too small. We want to hear about any and all of the bug fixes, issues that may come up. If there is something missing in the documentation, questions that you have that come up for you as you're building, we want to hear about it. If there are tutorials that might be helpful for you to start building these applications, let us know, and so that we can start to prioritize these things over the next few months of development.
With that said, Andre, where can people go to get involved and start engaging, preparing for this, not only a testnet release, but also the bigger picture and providing that kind of feedback to you and the team?
Yeah, so the best place to go to get started now would be sbtc.tech/developer release. You can sign up. We have an incentivized testnet where the Stacks Foundation has put out $50,000 worth of bounties. I'd also encourage everyone to go to the Stacks Discord. All of the core engineers are there. If you have any questions, you can interact directly with the broader community and many of the people who are working in these working groups. All of this work is also done on GitHub, by the way. We're working in an open source ecosystem. Everything is out in the open if you want to go and look on GitHub. And lastly, Kyle, I have to plug, you can go check out Bitcoin Writes, which is a newsletter that I write bi-weekly to stay up to date. That's where I typically publish any of the latest updates happening on sBTC and Nakamoto development.
A perfect plug. I can't recommend it more as well. Bitcoinwrites.com. Andre, great work that you put into that on a regular basis. And thank you for your time today and breaking down sBTC as well for us. Everyone, I'm your host today, Kyle Ellicott. Thank you for joining another edition of Bitcoin Builders Breakdown. Until next time. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.